So what I thought I would do, like I'm supposed to present polar kia, but in a way there are two things about polar kia that I think a little background will help. So in discussing its distribution, one thing that we are already now aware of from the discussion we had yesterday with McCloskey about the difference between responsive and rogative predicates, and that rogative predicates show kind of a dual character. They very easily lend themselves to kind of main clause syntax. And the other thing has to do with how we think about yes-no questions. So what I'm going to present today backtracks a little bit on what we have been talking up till now, as far as yes-no questions go. But I also think that we are now in a position to perhaps appreciate better than when we started, what does it mean to have a syntax for questions and a semantics for questions. So what I presented to you was the what is called what I consider like a baseline theory. It's what I call, or what people will call, the Hamlin-Katunen semantics for questions. And I presented a WH movement-based syntax of questions. And while the two go nicely together, and I suggested how they would map on by giving C0 the place where, so just to review, we have a finite clause is what we looked at, but anyway, a TP that has the verb, its arguments, and whatever aspectual modal property specifications we have, but that creates the nucleus, question nucleus. Then you have a C0 where it is decided whether it's plus WH or minus WH, such that if it's minus WH, then you just get a proposition, the set of worlds in which the nucleus proposition holds, or you have a plus WH specification, and then you create a set of propositions. And then if it's a WH question, you have something above C0, spec of CP, for example, from where you bind any free variables. And I'm setting aside high order because I'm really now trying to focus on the fact that, or on the issue of what is this relationship? Is it, are there other ways to do it? And one part of it I think I already had in my first handout, but that's a long time ago. We have moved on from there. In the sense that I think all of you now have a certain understanding of questions that I hope I hope we've made progress in the last few days. So it may be time to revisit. So this is what, roughly speaking, we had. TP, CP, and we said syntactically there's a trace and there's movement, and you get the WH phrase here, and there's some relationship between these two in whichever way you want to think of it, such that this is where you get the difference between a proposition, the type of the content, whether it's a proposition or a set of propositions. Why is this feeling different from the past? I don't know. Okay. So let's look at two things. First, of course, some variations in the syntax, and also other possible ways of interpreting, still getting the end result to be more or less the same. So the point that I want you to be sort of sensitive to is that there isn't a one-to-one correlation. If I have the syntax, then I have to have the semantics. If I have of course, adjustments have to be made, but in general, if you have syntactic arguments for saying we don't have WH movement, let's say, then it doesn't mean you can't get a Hamlin set of a Katunen Hamlin semantics, okay? So that's what I'm trying to drive at. That's the first part of today's talk. And then in the second part, I want to look at the yes-no, the semantics of yes-no questions and a bit of its pragmatics, okay? Okay. So I say that there are 4 different components to question semantics. So WH expressions have 2 parts. One is the existential quantifier, and the other is the domain, right, that the noun phrase gives. whether it's, if there's an actual NP, then you get it more explicitly. Otherwise, it may be implicit, right? What we were discussing earlier today, plus human or minus plus animate, whatever way in which you want to separate. So those are two parts. Then the other two components have to do with the role of the WHDP with respect to the clause. So the DP can determine the question nucleus by virtue of its position inside TP. So one is whether it's subject-object, and the other is by virtue of its scope position. So that's that is determined by, you know, where it is and what type of phrase it quantifies over. So
The wire should be, I think the wire.
oh, that's why it's, maybe that's what was, yeah, maybe this is better. Okay, so how do these things all come together? So this is what we had, I think, when you look at 1A and 1B, right? Oh no, so 1A and 1B. Okay, let me just for the heck of it. How many of you would give a different syntax than this one? Some of you have taken syntax classes, right? So, yeah, I have just given it as a movement, co-indexed. What other possible syntax would you give for a simple? Yeah, and then what you would have? But the WH phrase sits here or it moves? Just the feature moves. The whole phrase moves. Anything else? Any system in which there is nothing inside here? It's generated here. This is English. Generated here. And there's no trace, nothing. Anything else? Or if it's not a fronting language, then it's generated here, nothing moves, right? So there are all these options.
Maybe the one where which uses dependency relations, it would have neither movement with just verb and its relation to the verb.
Right. So that's sort of, let's say, monostrated theory. You just have what you see is what you get, nothing more. But of course, something must encode in the end. Okay, so let's think of it this way. Can we get the semantics that we have been exposed to on a system like 1A and 1B, where you really have there's nothing inside VP that says which book is the object of the verb. And in the second case, you say which student read which book. So again, when we had multiple WH, even in English, I did covert movement, right? We didn't spend so much time discussing it, but that was the idea. And there are theories that have sort of this structure. HPSG, I think, would be like that. And then there are systems with linked trees, etc., etc. So do they have to have a different semantics? And the answer is no. In fact, the kind of Hamlin Cartoonen set that we have been looking at was used by, was coupled with this kind of a system. You need to tap into two different, so one is a syntactic mechanism, and that's if I have a phrase here, WH phrase, then I have a filler, right? And that I can tell it's a WH phrase, so in my grammar I have something, or you can think from bottom up. If I see a transitive verb, read, and I don't find I'm in a language that's SVO and it doesn't combine with anything on the right, then I know there's a gap here. And there has to be a way of keeping track of that gap, because in the end, no matter what language, what construction, you want there to be a correlation between the arguments that the predicate needs and the syntactic objects you see, TP. So the idea is you might have a slash notation, some way of noting that there's a gap, some way of having an extra predicate. So you go up the tree and a sentence or a question is well formed. If at this point you have all your gaps are bound in a way, or you have found the binder for this. So in the interpretation, what you do is when you notate a gap, that is where you give it a variable. You say read doesn't have a syntactic argument, but I record its semantic structure by putting a variable. So read x sub I. And then I'll keep as I go up the tree. When I reach something that is its that can do the binding, then I interpret that with its existential quantifier and the domain of quantification. So basically, as far as the semantics goes, you come up with the same, because what you're saying is, I'm recording it syntactically differently, but the role that it would play, the gap plays the role of a variable, and the filler plays a role of the existential binder. So I can still use my Hamlin cartoon if that's what I want to use. Okay. The other, so that's one. I don't think most of you are probably exposed to this syntax much, but there are other variants that you've probably been exposed to. One is the, so I'm going now to the second one, which is having a Q morpheme. So now this is a structure where, let's say, you have a WH. Oh, sorry, and the second part of this that I forgot to mention is WH in situ. So in this system, if you have a WH phrase here or a quantifier, what do? Same idea, you see a quantificational expression. A quantificational expression has two parts. One is the variable. That's what you interpret in situ. The other part you put in store, in the semantic store, and you take it up the tree to a point where you can bind it, from where you can bind it. Then you unstore it, and then there has to be constraints on at what point should the store be empty in order for it to be a well-formed sentence. So clearly that's how you would get locality or islands. Any questions? Okay, so the other one is for, that is perhaps more familiar, that you've probably seen, is that when you have something like this, and this is especially appealing to languages where you don't have overt movement, you say, okay, this WH really corresponds to something that is like it's really a Q morpheme. And all that this does is it looks for all the WHs, if there are two, this Q morpheme binds whichever WHs are in there. Again, the syntax has to tell you whether everything gets bound here, or you can bind one here, you can, that's something that's an empirical generalization. So the system doesn't force it, but if you were taking it as a fact that everything must be bound locally, then that's what happens. Of course, this has to go with the semantics. So you can say again, yes, there's a slight difference in terms of where you interpret the domain of quantifier, but basically the existential quantification will come from here. Okay, and I'm going to present something, a particular way of doing it. But the idea is, these WH phrases that you see down there do not have any quantificational force. The quantificational force comes from here. This just provides the domain. So and the system is slightly different, but not radically different for our purposes for today. Okay, so we'll look at that in a bit, but this is a different syntactic way of parsing the quantifiers. Excuse me. And then the third one is the copy theory of movement, which is in some ways closer to what we had, but there you leave a copy. Both places, so you have, for each WH you have two pieces here, the existential quantifier and the domain, and you have the potential for two pieces here, existential quantifier and domain. And the idea is that that could represent movement, but it need not. It can be a single, every WH has two positions, a scope position and a base position, argument position. And it's linked. The idea is that in any chain, you only interpret one existential quantifier, one domain, and you only pronounce one. Languages may differ between which one you pronounce, the tail or the head, right? That's how you get the difference between WH in situ and fronted WH. So I think that's what I showed in 3A and 3B. Any questions? So let me just, overt and covert movement is characterized as phonetically realizing one or the other. One crucial difference, that they can actually occur at one single syntactic level. And in some sense, on this view, LF or transparent LF doesn't have the status that it did in earlier theories where you have a separate level of syntax. But all of the things we attributed to LF in that system has to be encoded in a system that says I can either pronounce the tail or I can pronounce the head. In particular, if you believe that the scope of fronted WH is different from the scope of WH in C2, then you have to embed that in this view that when you pronounce the tail of the chain, you have different syntactic options than when you pronounce the head of the chain. Okay, so do you get the general point? So suppose I'm one of those who thinks fronting is subject to, it can be non-local but subject to islands. Then you have to say when the head is pronounced, then the head and the tail can be separated by clauses as long as there are no islands. Whereas when it comes to pronouncing the tail of the chain, then I don't care about islands. So this is something that would have to be stated in that theory. If you're like me who thinks WH in C2 can only be interpreted locally, and fronted WHs can be non-local, subject to islands but non-local, then I would have to say that when you pronounce the head of the chain, then you can be non-local. When you pronounce the tail of the chain, then you have to be local. That's what you would have to say for quantifier raising, right? Quantifier raising, you always pronounce the tail and it's always local. So that's, I think, okay. Any questions? Yes, Shikar?
So sometimes when you're testing if a constant has moved or not, you use WH scope as a test. So for example, if something has moved out of the CP,
Mm-hmm.
you wouldn't expect a narrow scope reading, or within the same CP,
Uh-huh.
I guess. Yeah, so in a thing which uses the slash
Mm-hmm.
notation, it will still be looking for it from the base V, right? And it could say, okay, let me drop off the thing before CP, and then you would notice a narrow scope reading which you shouldn't find. I'm not sure.
No, so I'm actually maybe not sure I'm getting exactly the. So let's say you have a quantifier.
Yeah.
Okay, that's going to be in C2. So this is a non-WH quantifier, let's say. Okay, so someone saw everyone, and now you empirically you say it could take scope either at VP or at IP, is a TP?
No.
No.
So for example, if you have two CPs,
Uh-huh.
and then there's something moving from embedded object position or embedded subject position to somewhere above into the matrix first, then to check if that is there or not, you check if there is a narrow scope reading possible. Narrow scope in the sense possible within the embedded CP. Right?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And
Yeah.
if it's not there, then you say you shouldn't move.
Okay.
This is
Okay.
understanding.
So give me an example just so I don't mess it up.
I can't think of it.
Okay. Let's do it this way then. CP, and you're saying there's something here.
Yeah. And it has moved about.
It has actually physically moved somewhere here, right?
Yeah.
And so this is displaced. Okay. And then so this is not pronounced, let's say, right? Or it's not even there in the system. But this is where you want its variable to be.
Theta or
Yeah, the theta role. So there's a slash alpha. I'll just put alpha, right? So this CP is missing an argument, right? And then
so the V is missing an argument.
uh-huh.
And then how does how does the system know that it cannot drop it off here?
The CP
Yeah.
is not, unlike other cases where it should be local.
Yeah.
That's it. Okay, so this is not a system I know well, but I'm just kind of I'm playing this on TV, so to say, right? I'm not really a doctor. I play one on TV, that kind of a situation. But let me ask you, what will the movement people say? Because normally when there's movement, it's got to be, let's say, local. So there must be some feature, let's say it's non-finite clause maybe, right? Is that what you're thinking? It's a finite clause, it's missing something, but it's bound from way up, non-locally. So that means that what this system would say is that as long as you don't hit an island, you can keep going, right? And it will not get I suppose there's some other quantificational element here, right? That's what you're saying. It shouldn't get narrow scope, that's how we know it's moved about this, right? So the first thing it will say is that this slash need, there's no restriction except in the case where we hit an island. So right now it's just keep on going, missing an alpha, missing till we get here. By the time we get here, data has already been interpreted. So we still have this in store when we hit this, so it will get obligatory wide scope. So I think what I'm trying to say is that you replay whatever syntactic constraints you believe in this system, not in terms of movement, but in terms of how far you can go with something in store. If you believe that, islands differ across languages, sometimes some languages don't obey some islands, some do, then this system has, just like in the other systems, movement can be, in language X, NP or DP counts as an island, in language Y, DP doesn't. They would have to say the same thing. In language X, the slash can be resolved up beyond DP. In language Y, it must be resolved within DP. So there may be other differences, but in terms of the semantics, you're still saying the variable will be in its original argument position, the verb that is missing its argument, and the binder can be syntactically far away, depending on whatever is the constraint. Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's so. When you have a sentence like, "Why do you think John fixed the car?" So there are two readings possible. One is John fixed the car, and what's your why do you and what is the reason such that
So downstairs and upstairs construal. What's the reason for your thinking that he did?
Yes, and another
Is
he did.
what do you think? According to you, what was his reason for thinking? Same story. Suppose in negation you don't get one reading. So either of those clauses can take a while phrase, right? It's an adjunct that can apply to either the fixing or the thinking. And so the ambiguity would be captured in the same way. On one view, we can put the slash alpha downstairs, and assuming there are no islands like negation or something, it can get resolved all the way up, but it will still mean when we hit Y, but it will still mean reason for fixing the car. In the other system, John fixed the car, doesn't matter, and it's why do you think so? So it will slash alpha will come higher up. So for all of the basic cases, I think there won't be a difference. Now, maybe there's something in the system that will make radically different predictions. I don't quite see how, but what I'm trying to say is, if you fix your syntax, whatever resolution, then you can use the same semantics, and in fact people have. So people who work with that system also use Katunen or Hamlin. Okay? The last one is what Rinku was suggesting, and that we also looked at in Manetta's paper, and which is saying that the DP that we see, the WHDP, has these two components, of course. There's the quantifier that tells you where it takes scope, where you get the binding from, and there's the domain, right? What is the content? What are you going to quantify over? So all WHs that we've looked at basically quantify over, have existential quantifiers. But some quantify over individuals, some over properties, propositions. By now we've got a whole range of them, right? And that clearly is based on the form of the WH as we saw this morning. So on this view, you split the two up. You have these two different features. One is the essentially the scope feature, the quantificational feature. The other is the content feature, the WH, what is called WH in the system. And again, you have to match it up somehow. So either you can have a system where C has, let's say C is IQ, interpretable Q feature, then it can bind it. It becomes not so similar to this in some sense, right? Because you have these indices that it can bind, unless you say, yeah, so basically it can either attract. So the feature system is not a replacement of movement. It can be, but is not necessarily a replacement, because you can say this feature attracts the WH to move next to it, and then you can go back to doing what we had. Or you can say this feature can interpret WH in situ that stays here by forming, by feature population perhaps, or something. So again, mix and match. So far, I've given you a number of different syntactic approaches, none of them that I control that well, but that's the range that I've been exposed to. And for each one of them, as I said, you could think of doing it with Hamlin, Cartoon, and semantics. Now what I'm going to do is actually look at different ways of interpreting WH. So on the the variation on the semantic side. So I'm somewhere in the middle of page 2. So if you look at 5a, this is interpreting now something like this, okay? So this is taking, okay, no, let me step back 1 minute. Basically what this is saying is which student read which book, okay? So that's the question. And suppose that one phrase has moved. Which student, which book is here? And this has got the index of both 1, 2. This can be interpreted using the Hamlin-Cartoonan system that we have, which is there's one single existential that this Q provides. So it's a null existential that is unselective. That's what you have to say, okay? It's an unselective binder in the sense that I'm an existential. I can either replicate myself 3 times, or I have a certain character that allows me to bind more than one. And that basically takes 2 variables. There exists an X and there exists a Y, okay? So it can be done either as pairs, or you can just think of it as there exists an X, there exists a Y. This is what we have been doing, right? It just comes about in a slightly different way. The next one is the alternative, and this is an alternative that makes it very clear how I can interpret this without moving it. So how many of you have been exposed to the description Heimian indefinite, or Deasing, or but the idea that indefinites are not existential quantifiers? And the reason for that is that indefinites can have more than one reading, right? So if I say, I read a book, then how many books do I need to read for it to be true? At least one, right? So that's its minimal truth condition. So as long as there's one book that I read, I'm good. But if I say, I read books, oh no, I don't want to, no. A book is a good thing to read. Let's say I make a generic statement. Is that about a particular book? There exists a book that is good to read? No, it's about books in general. If you were forced, if I gave you your choice of quantifiers, existential or universal, which one would you choose? Which one would you rather choose? For all, right? It seems like books, and a book is a good thing to read is general statement. So the general idea is that we can make, we can say that indefinites simply contribute a predicate, and depending on the structure, aspect, etc., that determines whether the quantifier that will be used will be an existential or universal. So that's kind of what is in the, that was what was behind this unselective binding that was proposed for this Q morpheme. There were some problems with that view. So its successor is this choice functional analysis, okay? So just think that the end result is exactly the same. Now suppose I say, I put this in this lovely new bag I got, and I name these chalks A, B, and C. So they all have names. Let me see. One is the tallest one, and one is a, okay, right? So there are 3 pieces of chalk, and I put them here. No, first let me say, if I wanted to say which piece of chalk is good, or whatever, I don't know. Which piece of chalk do you want? You have, so normally you want only one, but your choice, I don't know which one, right? So the set of propositions will be you want this one, this one, this one, right? And you can describe it as the longest one, the short one, the middle one, or the one on the left, the one in the middle one, any number of ways, but you're basically quantifying over 3 individual pieces of chalk. When you use choice functions, it's the exact same thing, except you get to the individuals via the set. So I give you a set, and now I say, for some way of picking out a member of the set, so instead of saying there exists an X, if you look here, so student will keep the way it was. Let's say for the WH and C2, there is a choice function. There's a way of picking out from a set an individual such that the propositions will be X read, so X will be whoever, we don't worry about that, F of book. So F is a way of picking out. So one way of picking out will be the longest chalk. That will give me the proposition. This was A, right? Bill read A and John read A. Then there's another way of picking out from the set, which picks out the smallest piece of chalk. And this will give me, so what I have down here is the set book. But this is a set of individuals, right? But instead of a set of individuals, I'm saying I'm going to quantify. There are 3 ways in which I can pick out an individual from this. One way is to go for the smallest. The other is to go for the longest. The third is to go for the middle one. I may have other descriptions. I may say, which is the one on the left? Which is the one on the right? So there's a way of picking out the one on the left, way of picking out the one on the right, or way of picking out the one in the middle. All of this sounds like, why bother, right? A little bit. Because the end result is the same. But the point is, you can leave it in C2, and you can treat it the way you treat indefinites that don't have their own quantificational force. It's the WH, it's the fact that we are dealing with a WH that says, I have a null existential here. What this Q, the semantics of this Q morpheme will be a null existential choice function over choice functions. And you can do, it will be the set of properties F such that there exists a choice function and that choice function has that property. So I'm not going to do, you just do a generalized quantifier instead of over individuals, you do it over choice functions. I don't expect us to do all the, practice with it. Go for the idea and think that, so go for 2 things. One, the basic idea and how it maps slightly differently from the syntax. Because in the way I was doing it earlier, that we were studying, there was no way you could leave the WH in here. You had to move it out because the WH phrase itself was the existential quantifier. So the binding, it had to get to a scope position. In this case, the WH phrase is just the predicate, just book. All it does is give you the set of books. But it comes with this variable that says there's a way of picking out things from this set. So if there are 3 pieces of chalk in here, there will only be 3 choice functions. You can give it different names if you want. But the end result, whether I say the function that takes the one on the left, or I say the function that gets the longest piece of chalk out, it's still the same the result is the same. So in the end, how many propositions will you have? Let's make this a name. So Jane read F of book. If there are 3 books, how many propositions will you get with the excessive choice function? 3, right? So if the 3 books are War and Peace, I don't know, you guys had more interesting books this morning, but now I'm even blanking. Emma and something else, The Idiot. Pardon? Pride and Prejudice. Then there would be, you would get 3 results. One would be, find me a choice function such that the character, the book is named after a character, you would get Emma, right? If you had the choice function, the book that starts with the letter P, I'm just making this up, you'd get Pride and Prejudice and whatever was the 3rd one. So in the end, you get the same result, whether you do 3 individuals or you do 3 ways of picking out individuals from a set. You just get at them differently. You also increase the power of your system because now you don't need movement, or you change the predictions of your system. Okay? So there are some non-trivial consequences, but we don't have to discuss that today. Okay? So does everyone have a handle on the basic connection between the two? The reference for this, there are 2 papers by Tanya Reinhardt from 97-98, and it's there in my book in the references. There's a paper or work by Yoav Winter. You can read up on that, and it's used quite a bit, but just remember that in the basic cases, it gives you what quantifying over individuals does. However, the one big difference that I'll mention right now is this. Choice function doesn't say anything about islands in and of itself, right? You can build that in, but it doesn't say anything, so it can violate islands, just the way it's set up. Whereas movement is synonymous with island constraints, right? So you can build that into choice functions too, but it kind of isn't tied to it in the same way. Yeah.
In English, where we see that island violations do not occur, so how do we explain? How do we tie that?
So,
functional analysis.
Okay, so there is a way of doing. Okay, I'll give you a data that actually isn't airtight. Okay, but this is just for illustration. So suppose you have which student was which philosopher will get upset if we invite which linguist. There's an island, the WH is in C2, and now you get this reading, and you say, suppose you say that you don't want to move even at LF because either you don't have LF, which is what Reinhardt was saying, or you think islands WH movement is local, covert WH movement is local. Either way, how do you explain this reading, right? So you can use choice functions. So that would be like this. You would interpret the first X through movement, and you say we have this would be just like what we were doing. And the second one, you would say choice functions are island insensitive, and so I can bind which philosopher will be offended if we invite which linguist. I will leave the linguist in C2, and I'll bind it from an existential quantifier all the way up. Existential quantifier, that is a quantifier over choice functions. And then when you do the parsing, you'll get the same. You'll get philosopher X will be offended if we invite linguist A. Philosopher B will be offended if we invite linguist B, etc. So, and then now what I have left out of the story is how do we get pairless answers? Is it just simple? Because if you just apply answer D, you'll get a single pair answer. And I don't want to get into it, but that's where there may be differences between them.
To not get a grammatical reason
get that reading. So the claim would be, these are non-trivial questions, of course, so here's where you would ask this question. I said, which philosopher will be offended if I invite which linguist? And now we do this and we get this reading. But if I said, Mary will be offended if we invite which linguist? That's ungrammatical. So there are two things you could say. One thing you could say is this choice functional, this null existential over choice functions needs to be triggered by something local movement. You could say that. Not implausible, I think, because on this view, why do we need movement at all, right? So you have to say other things, but you're absolutely right. If we could say this is plus WH, doesn't matter that something is in an island, and this license is an existential, we should be able to get a good reading. So this goes back to my point that syntax semantics, you can choose this semantics and it may help you with something, but it comes with its own, it gives you power that you may then have to restrict if the syntax, if the facts tell you otherwise, right? So there are no easy solutions. But this is to say that you could have movement or not. You might want choice functions. We might want to work with choice functions. Any other question here? So personally, I think that natural language has more than one way of doing scope for WH. And part of it is actually due to those of you, well, I don't think any of you were there at the listen that Klaus Abels was at 2014. You all young kids. But basically he and I started working on the fact that when you have islands, or not islands, sorry, non-local scope like this, you don't get sluicing. You can't say so some philosopher was offended because we invited some linguist, but I don't know which philosopher, which linguist. Apparently that's not good when you get two WHs. So our general claim was that sluicing, where you just have the WHs and you don't have the full, you allowed the TP, requires actual movement. So you can get some philosopher like some linguist, but I don't know which philosopher, which linguist. That's good because they can both move. It's local, no islands. But whenever you have islands, then you don't get a sluice. But you get a good reading. So if I said, but I don't know which philosopher was offended because we invited which linguist. So the full form is okay. And you get that reading. So those are the kinds of issues that come up. But like I said, it can lend itself to island violations, but it doesn't enforce. Therefore, then you need to have other ways of enforcing island violations. So the one point that I think I had mentioned earlier, that when you have a WH and you have, so whether you get the existential from the WH phrase itself or from a covert existential operator, even in this system, we want the existential here. So we want lambda p, the existent x or the existent f, doesn't matter what system you use, p equals something something, x or f, whatever be the case. Why do you not want, so why do you need it outside of p and not inside of p? Is this clear to people? Suppose that something was bound from within, below the position where you introduce p, what would happen? Let's do it with just x. Suppose I said lambda p, the existent x, left x. How many propositions would you get in this set? One proposition, and that proposition would be someone left. But of course that's not an answer, is it? It's the presupposition of the question. So that's why the binding has to come from outside, so that you can actually vary the x. Okay, so that's All right. So yeah, so the last system that I want to introduce actually goes back to Hamlin. So I presented the system that goes, it's a blend. It's called the Hamlin Cartoonin set. What makes it Cartoonin is the view that WH phrases are existential quantifiers that take scope. What makes it Hamlin? So Cartoonin what, built on Hamlin. Hamlin said questions are the set of possible answers, not just the true answers. And that's what we have, right? These are all the possible answers, and then we say there's an answer hood operator that comes and picks out the answer. Cartoonin had only the set of true propositions in the set. So that's the part that is Hamlin. The existential quantifier part is Cartoonin. Hamlin himself did not have indefinites as a, did consider WH phrases and indefinites together. Most people do. They see this kinship between indefinites and WH expressions. It's not so obvious in English, and actually not perhaps so obvious in Hindi, I don't know, but you can say kiss ladka and koi ladka, there's some connection. So people have said that across languages there's definitely some kind of morphological connection between indefinites and WH expressions. And the view of treating them as being existential quantifiers certainly brings them together. The view treating them as predicative terms that gets bound by that has a choice functional variable brings them together. And this the third system that I'm presenting, which is the focus-based semantics, also treats them as similar. So on this view, the way this starts is, this is Hamlin's original,
Could you explain 6b
dash. Oh, that one. Okay, so 6b, everyone's gave me that semantics, right? 6b dash says there exists a choice function. Okay, what is that proposition? It says for some choice function, forget the student part, just this left, let's say. There is some way of picking out from the set such that the individual picked out left. It doesn't say what, so it says any proposition that has this form, there is a way of picking out from the set that gives you someone left. So it's really, again, it's not specifying now if there are 5 people, it says there's some way, we don't know which way. That's with F, yeah.
What about student X?
Oh no, student X is bound from our, this is cut and paste error, right? So I didn't put in each one, what I should have done, cross out student X from both of those, right? Because all I'm doing now is with student left. So this is very bad cut and paste. Thank you for pointing that out. So 6b, you should delete, no, 6b is fine because it says there exists an X and X left, and X is a student and X left. Okay, so that's good. The second one should say there exists an F. F is a choice function. So its restriction is this, that it's a, what is its type? It takes a non-empty set and gives you something from it. So it should be something like this. F is a choice function. And there exists something that is a choice function, and when you use it to pull out student, you can say that individual that you get, the output of that function left. The output of that function, depending on which one you choose, could be A or B or C or D, right? So one of them left. So you get the same result. I should fix this.
So how do we interpret student?
So student is the set, right? And it says who left. So let me do it maybe with types, might be a little bit easier to see. If we say student left, right? This is the WH. And this gets translated as F of student. So this is a set of individuals, A, B, C, let's say, and this can apply to this set and either pick out, depending on what this is, it can either pick out A, or it can pick out B, or it can pick out C. It's defined for all of them. So its output is a type E type, an individual type. So this is type ET, set of students. This is a function from this type to type E, some individual. But it says, you know, depending on where I get bound, all I'm saying is I'll give you a student. I'll take this and grab something out of it. But if it's bound existentially, then all it says is there's some way of picking out from the set that gives you a student. And the set is made up of students, so it could be any one of them. It's a bit like iota in the sense that iota takes a set and gives you an individual. But iota is restricted to only those sets that have exactly one. This one, you might even argue, you know, you want more than one maybe. So otherwise, so it's very close to iota in a way, but it's bound by an existential. That's sort of the real difference. Okay. So, ready to look at 7a? So on this view, this is Hamlin's view, that instead of dealing with individuals and sets of individuals for DP, let's say John or Mary, and the predicate left as the set of individuals, everything is enclosed in a set. Everything is one level up. So who is like an indefinite, like someone virtually? And if there are two people in the domain, then that set will include, it will denote the set of those two individuals. So when we say who has to be multi-membered in order to be, that's sort of the felicity condition on who, let's say, that it should be multi-membered set. So let's say you have Sue and Bill, then the predicate is going to be left, let's say. That's a single-membered set because unless it's focused, you only get a set. So who doesn't need to be focused, or you can say it's inherently focused, that it always has multi-membered set, but proper names normally will just denote the set with that individual, unless it's focused. And you say John left, and then you have to build this semantics up that way. But the idea is that when you do functional application, you're doing what is called point-wise functional applications. For each individual in this domain, you interpret the, you apply it to the function on the right. There's only one function on the right, which is left. So you take one member and you apply left to Sue, and you get Sue left. Again, you take that same member and you apply Bill to it, and you get Bill left. So you end up with the TP meaning Sue left and Bill left. So the funny thing here, as you can see, it has the same meaning that we had in this system for who left, right? More than one, you need a pair of at least two individuals, and then you have the set of propositions. But the interesting thing is that it has already happened at the TP level. So at the TP level, you have a set of individuals. Bill left, Sue left. So if you're dealing with questions, suppose above this is your CP, C is plus WH, you're basically done. So the meaning for C0 will change. So again, I'm not saying that when you switch these systems, everything stays the same. It cannot, because the end result could be the same, but you're building it up differently. So if you already have the set of propositions, then you want to say, this is just the identity function. The meaning of CP is simply what you had here. So you end up here with the same meaning. Bill left, Sue left. Two propositions. This is what we had in the old system. That's actually my point, that you can get the same result, but you're doing it through focus semantics rather than through you treating indefinites as quantifiers and building it that way. Yeah.
In the previous like 6b dash,
Mm-hmm.
so there even if we have the quantification inside, since the quantifier is that of a choice function, can't the function pick out, would we still have that problem of some student left, or
Yes, no, it would still be that, because it's not allowing you to pick out one student at a time. It's simply saying, what proposition am I? I'm the proposition that says there's a way of picking out a student such that he or she left. In world 1, it could be A. In world 2, it could be B. So it leaves open that possibility. There are 3 ways of picking them out. I don't know which one it is the case in this world. So this is a little bit different because there is no existential quantifier. So just at this point already you have a question meaning. So basically then all you want to say is plus, when it's plus WH, you don't, you give it the same, the value of the TP passes up the tree. So it's the identity function, it takes a TP and moves it up. When it is an indefinite, that's when you have work to do here. Then that says, I am the function, I'm the proposition that tells you that in any, as any world in which this is true is will be admitted. So that would be the disjunction A left or B left or C left, or however many. At least each of these propositions should be true in one of the worlds that we have that goes into this final denotation. So you do the collapsing in this case instead of the expanding. So if you want to think of it that way, in our old system, if you had a question, then you expanded the meaning from a proposition to a set of propositions. If you had a declarative, then you stuck with what you had. Here it's a reverse. Here you have a set of propositions, and if you have a question, you can stay with that. But if you have a declarative, then you want to make sure that the set of propositions becomes the single proposition that is denoted. So, okay. So that's basically giving you a taste of what else is out there. No pressure that you understand everything. You don't, this is really a way to make you feel comfortable going out in the world and saying, I can read the paper by Reinhardt because, well, I heard it. I heard the word choice function already. How hard can it be? I know that in the end, all I want is a set of propositions. So it's giving you hooks to that, but it's not, I don't expect that in 40 minutes you should get every single detail, but enough of a roadmap, let's put it like that. Is it good enough for a roadmap? Okay. So now we still have some time. So I want to introduce, like I said, this idea that where I want to shift the meaning of a polar question a little bit, okay? So one thing is Hamlin actually had built into this, for a polar question, all you would have, okay, never mind. I'm going to let that be. It'll come up when we do this. Okay, so I'm going to introduce another term, which is an alternative question. Some of you may have heard of it already, but if not, this is your chance. So there's a polar question, which we have been discussing a lot in this class. Is it raining? Do you understand what I'm saying, etc., right? And we know that it's a yes-no question, the term polar question or yes-no question, because it allows for a yes or a no answer. But if you ask a WH question, then you can't say yes, right? So that's the fundamental difference we've been working on. At the same time, we've been interpreting polar, so is it raining has been interpreted as what? What are the two propositions?
It is raining and it is not raining.
It is raining and it is not raining. Okay. What's the meaning of is it raining or not? Choose one, but the thing is, it still denotes the same, right? And the third is, what about isn't it raining? So this would be the nucleus proposition, and not, let's assume, gives you, it's not the case that it's not raining, i.e. it is raining. So you should end up with the same proposition. But the fact of the matter is that they have slightly different, we've already been talking about bias, right, in terms of isn't it raining. That's just one reason. So Bollinger in 1978, so argued against Hamlin's view that a yes-no question creates a two-membered set, the proposition. So this is Hamlin for yes-no. And Bollinger said no, a yes-no polar question should be different. And part of his argument was the following. If you say, does John want tea? You can say, yes, he does. No, he doesn't, and we got this by, in the way that we discussed, you take the nucleus proposition and you give it the proposition that is its complement, right? That denotes the complement set of words. So, first of all, positive and negative polar questions have the same denotation. And secondly, so doesn't John not want tea or doesn't John want tea has the same denotation. Furthermore, does John want tea or not also has the same denotation, right? You can even flesh it out fully and you can say, does John want tea or does John not want tea? But ask yourself, do they have the same, does it sound to you like the same pragmatically? Can I say to you, do you want tea or you don't want tea? Or do you want tea or not? Doesn't it sound a little aggressive as an opening gambit? I think Bisma has called it the cornering effect. You typically, when do you ask, so as a neutral, as an initiating question, do you want tea is fine. I have no expectations whether you want tea, you don't want tea, but it's on offer. Don't you want tea? I kind of have the feeling that perhaps you, yeah, so there's that bias thing. But do you want tea or not is like I've been asking you for some time and you're giving me all kind of, well, you know, in this weather, tea, it's like, okay, do you want it or not? So it feels like you have been obfuscating or not answering and, you know, talking to other people. So why should this be the case? That's sort of, you know, that was one kind of argument he made. Yes. Yeah, okay. So no, so let's hold off on that till I talk about alternative questions. So right now I'm taking the minimal, it's a triple that if you just interpret what's there, you should get, and you know, don't think about pragmatics or anything. This is what you would say. So one question is, can you answer yes or no to do you want tea or not? Yes, even it sounds odd, even though I suppose there could be a way of thinking yes means I want tea. But grammatically it really doesn't like that, right? So I don't know if Bollinger really spelled it out in quite this way, but certainly Trifka has argued, I think others too, that yes and no are anaphoric elements. And anaphora looks for resolution. There should be something that it in the discourse that it can that can play its antecedent role, and in this case they both have equal priority, or the two sets, so I don't know which one you mean by yes and which one you mean by no. So the idea is, let's keep polar questions as just denoting the nucleus proposition. And the others, so I'm setting aside negation case, but the polar negative is what has these two. It is raining and it is not raining. And now if I say yes, in this case, this is what it refers to. It's anaphoric to this proposition in the discourse. But in this case, it doesn't know which one, and therefore you don't get a yes no answer. That's why, even though it means really very, if it means anything, it means something like this, but grammatically you don't get a yes no answer. Okay, so the idea is, so he has this example or similar examples. Suppose you meet somebody, you're starting a conversation. This is similar to what I earlier said about tea or not tea. You can say, do you play golf? And that's fine, but we are in an appropriate context, or even otherwise. Maybe I'm just interested in what kind of sports you play, but I can't say, do you play golf or not? The other thing is, if I just say, do you play golf? There are two kinds of, there's only one kind of yes answer, right? Yes, I play golf. But if you say no, then it's clear you don't play golf, but you could say something else. You could say, no, I play tennis. Or you could say, no, I don't play golf. So the idea is that, one way to think about it is that this is what it denotes. Yes answer definitely simply says, this is what it means. A no answer says, this is not what I mean. Instead, or this is not true, I don't hold to this. But in the case of it is raining, I think the only alternative, or you could say, if you can think of some various shades of weather, you could say, no, it is snowing, or no, it is cloudy. But certainly in the case of games, it's very easy to give focus to, do you play golf? No, I play tennis. Or, no, I don't play golf. So the point is that if you have a singleton, you can coerce it into having, depending on what the context is, you can say, this is a question, I have to make it to be pragmatically plausible, I have to give more than one option. What could be the other options? That could be up to the pragmatics, or there are languages like Turkish where you actually mark focus. So if I remember right, one of my students did a qualifying paper on this, so I'm trying to remember that correctly. Umit Atlamaz. Depending on where you put the particle me, so do you play golf? If the me has scope over, let's say, the verb, then you say, no, I don't play golf. But if the me is marked on golf, do you so that's also SOV, you golf, me play, then you said, no, I play tennis. So alternatives to golf. And in fact, even in English, I think you can separate them out with intonation. So this is, I think, not trivial. This is a good argument, but here's another one. Any questions, comments? Yes.
What do you call Viram focus?
I think Viram focus would be, yes, it is, no, it is and it isn't. So Viram really, or people say, it's a little bit emphatic, right? Yes, it did, no, it didn't. That's where they use Viram focus. But this is saying that you don't have to go to that, you can go to something else, right? So that's like saying, which sport do you play? It's equivalent to, it becomes almost close to that, right? I play golf, I play tennis, and you can choose one of those. So it's a little bit, depending on, again, the context, or on the intonational contour, you get different sets. Whereas Viram focus will always give you just that, the yes, no, or the positive and the negative, I should say. Okay, so then there's this other example in 15. There were these constructions called unconditional. In Hindi, I don't think it quite uses a WH. We use more like chahe wo I ya na, maybe, and maybe that too is an alternative. But certainly in English, I cannot say where the bill comes, we will have a party. It's just plain ungrammatical. But you can say whether the bill comes or not, we'll have a party. And so this is the kind of argumentation that he has a whole slew of cases that where they differ. So I think the current view on yes-no questions is either that they denote singleton sets, or that if they denote multi-membered sets, there is some way of marking the nucleus as privileged. So there's this approach to questions called inquisitive semantics, in which and there's an analysis of yes-no questions that will say if the question is it raining, then this proposition is highlighted. And then you say, yes, no are response particles that look for highlighted propositions. And on that view, alternative questions, then there's no particular privilege. You're giving all the alternatives, or even in a WH question, all of the alternatives are at the same level. Whereas in a yes-no question, one is given priority over the others or has a privileged status. So one way or the other, it cannot be just what we had been assuming so far. I think this is pretty much the current norm about yes-no questions. So, any questions here? Okay. Last one, now alternative questions. Ankana, this is where what you were saying plays a role. So, you can have alternative questions. The classic one is, do you want tea? So, intonation, intonation, intonation. Prosody, prosody, prosody. Would you like tea or coffee? Someone comes to your house. That's a yes, no, right? I think I said it with the right intonation. You're saying, and if you say yes, then you might say, okay, which one? But basically, saying yes, I'd like tea or coffee is saying, I'd like a hot drink, right? One of the. But if I say, would you like tea or coffee? Now you're giving a choice. And one of the observations about this is that it's not really allowing me to say, yes, I want tea, yes, I want coffee, or no, I don't want tea, no, I don't want coffee. There's a sense in which I'm presupposing that you want one or the other, and then giving you a choice between them, and you choose. And what the prosody signals, so there are two pieces to this prosody, and there have been studies arguing for which one is more important, but there are two parts. If I can do this right, you may be able to tell. One is that there's when you do a yes-no, there's a single pitch accent, and I think I must have, yeah. Do you want tea or coffee? I don't have a separate pitch accent on tea and coffee. And then I have do you want tea or coffee? I guess it's a rising intonation. That's how I was supposed to say it. In the other case, do you want tea or coffee? And then you have a falling intonation at the end. Apparently, there are also alternative questions where you can continue the rise, and that says that there may be other options. But in the simple case, there are these two options, and you don't say yes or no. I mean, you can always refuse, but I think you probably will say, no, I don't want either, or something like that. So again, remember, question-answer paradigms are always a very delicate diagnostic, because in context we have a certain amount of margin on how we answer. But the point of this yes-no test is that margin doesn't extend to do you want tea or not. Even there we have a resistance to the yes-no. So there's clearly something in the grammar of yes-no versus the set of propositions that distinguishes between them. So I think, again, this is fairly accepted at this point, is that the falling tone at the end of an alternative question kind of marks closure, given you all the options that I have available. You can extend that set of options. You can say, do you want tea, coffee, or juice? So, or you can even extend it, would you like tea, coffee, or both? If you can think of having tea and coffee together. Or do you want tea, coffee, both, or neither? I think that all options, the point is that you cannot just say if I say tea or coffee, you can't say both without sort of changing the terms of our of the situation. So if you go to a fixed price dinner, you pay X amount and you can take, you typically have a choice between the starters, choice of the main item, etc. I don't think you can get away with saying both, okay? So that's where the alternative question really carries weight. But because the context also tells you, right, there's one of them. But the idea is that alternative questions seem to come with that. Yeah. And then the other point is this, the closure. So if you say both, so the point is, why is it that you always have the expectation that it will be a positive answer, and it will be exactly one? So the answer operator that we have been discussing lends itself to this very readily, because it says, okay, the following contour tells me these are all my options. So you want tea, addressee wants tea, addressee wants coffee. And the answer operator says choose one of them, the maximally informative. There's no entailment relation between tea and coffee, so you either choose one or the other, that's fine. If you give both as the option, that's like saying you want tea or coffee or tea and coffee. Now you have an entailment relation, so suppose you do want tea and coffee, that will be the proposition that says addressee wants tea plus coffee will be the maximally informative one, the one that entails the other two sentences, and that's what the answer hood operator will pick. And of course, if you don't want either of them, that too is fine, that too is possible, right? Once you give that option. So the idea is that once you create the set of alternatives, the existential presupposition in the answer hood operator guarantees that one of them will be true, and it guarantees that so that will, unless you give neither as an option, you cannot answer nothing without violating the presuppositions, and unless you give both as an option, you're not allowed to choose both of them. Okay, you're in the fixed menu world. So this is going to be relevant when we discuss polar K, as well as in terms of the distribution, as well as what we discussed earlier in terms of the difference between rogative and responsive predicates. Now it's 4 o'clock. I'm done with this. Are there questions? Yeah.
When you were talking about that me,
Yeah, the Turkish particle.
so that is within the focus semantics, right?
Yeah, that's how he interpreted it. So your question is how would, yeah.
Yes. Does it extend to then constituent negation or things of sort? Or is it a totally different?
I think if you take the whole, if it has scope over the whole, so if you have, it is raining me, then it would have scope over the whole proposition. But you have in mind something else, I think, right? As in,
Yeah, because the me was shifting.
Yeah.
There was something like the way we do constituent negation.
the thing to its immediate, yeah.
So
I think he treated it as the focus semantic value of the immediately preceding. I think it was to the left, but I could be wrong about that. Maybe I'm influenced by Hindi. But the idea was then you have a set of, let's say you have, do you want tea, and me is focused on tea. Then it would give the values tea, coffee, etc., right? So this was the thing. You have to have, you want tea as separate, as distinguished, in order to denote the yes, to provide something for the yes answer. So he was using roots focus semantics and saying a question has an ordinary semantic value, which is the set a la Bollinger with just the nucleus proposition. And it has a focus semantic value, which is a set of propositions that builds on the focus semantic value of the me phrase. So on the ordinary semantic value, you have, it is, addressee wants tea. On the focus semantic value, you have addressee wants tea, addressee wants coffee. And then his analysis was that the yes answer simply takes the proposition in the ordinary denotation and confirms that. The no answer simply denies that. I don't want coffee. I don't want tea. But if you want to be cooperative and elaborate what you do want, then you go to the focus semantic value. You take a proposition from there. And then you're locked into saying, I want coffee or whatever are the other alternatives. Whereas if the me was on the whole proposition, then your options would be, I want tea, I don't want tea, and you're done. So I think that's what how he was building it up.
And does that help? So we were talking about this pre-verbal position in our languages, and it has been argued that that's the focus position.
So I was also responding to your question from the other evening. So in this, if you say pre-verbal position is a focus position, and that's where all the WHs are inherently focused, then that would be saying that we follow the focus semantics and we interpret all WHs, not just yes, no, but WH phrases using focus semantics, except that there is a position at which that focus feature is checked, let's say, as opposed to the Q feature. And that could, the thing that I would like to think more about is this. Let's say a language has both options, movement and focus semantics. People have argued for that, right? And a language, so let's say WH and C2 always focus semantics. Movement, always cartoon and semantics. Do we predict differences in meaning in languages that never do movement, only do focus movement to pre-verbal position, and languages that do fronting? In the simple case, it's very hard to tell that they're different because, as you see, the results we get are so similar, right? Whether you do who left with existential, movement and then use it in treating it as an existential quantifier, or you just do focus percolation, comes to the same. There are subtle differences among languages when you get to complex structures. But by and large, not as much as you would expect. Now, that could be because these systems end up, I don't know if it's an accident that the systems give us similar results because we were geared to doing it. There's one place where there is a difference, and maybe I can try to present that. Let me just try to remember that. So this is Katsa and Shimoyama, and they're talking about Japanese. Now remember that Japanese, we have looked at those sentences, and this is the general. I'm going to do it pseudo-English, okay? So if you have John knows, and your Q is here, like the kam, right? So the Q morpheme is here, and you say who left, or who saw who, let's say. Both of them have local scope. If you have John knows, what am I thinking? So, okay, the reason they say that all WH, so the first so they're treating it as in focus semantics, and that they say the minute it reaches this operator, it kind of closes off the options, so it gets bound, because they're trying to get locality. And they also want to get the difference between Q morpheme that gives you existential quantification over both, and there's another morpheme which is mo, and that gives you universal reading, but they're both all local. So this is good, except remember we also had this case where you had, so if if there was a Q morpheme here, this has to become a yes-no question over this. So that's why they presented, they designed the system to do local binding. But one problem is who knows who saw who, where you get the pair list between, let's say, this and this. So no matter whose theory you follow, you have to find a way to allow one of them to either escape and get bound there, or in my terms to get bound from here and give a high order reading, etc., etc. So this, I don't know, this is these are the sorts of things that you want to look at. And again, the other possibility, other variant is that if you look at Bulgarian and you have exactly this structure, who knows who saw who, except that the form will be who. So this is Romanian, Bulgarian, multiple fronting languages. And now who, whom, whatever, saw. So this is fronted. Oh yeah, I know where I was going with this. This does not allow this pairing. So that's one set of issues. Interestingly, Hungarian is supposed to be this kind of a language, except that one of them is supposed to go into focus position. So you would say that it follows focus semantics, but that too does not allow this reading. So I don't think just using a particular semantics really gives you all the scopal options. So in the end, I think you have to say something about cross-linguistic variation that doesn't totally just rely on saying WHNC2 uses such and such. So, but this is where I would like to take it, to see if there's, the possibility of deriving some differences by saying WHNC2 across languages follows the simplest option, which is, say, choice function or focus. Movement follows the simplest option, namely existential quantifier, something like that. But I have a feeling it won't be that simple when you really get to these tricky kind of cases. So in Hungarian, if you leave something in situ, then it can get this reading. If you move it all to the focus position, it won't, etc., etc. So that's for the background. Should we just, since our tea is coming at 4:30, shall we get so you have two choices at this point. Do you want to work in your groups and think about what you want to do and wait till tomorrow for me to present Polar Kya? Or do you want to listen to Polar Kya? Do you want to work? Okay. Work. Don't go. We have chai and samosa and gulab jamun coming to give you energy to work. So. Works very nicely. the equivalent of, for your third presentation, there's no ban on that. Just leaving you free to do something else if you would rather. If you read that and you have questions.
Yeah, but I did not bring up the question, the
Yeah, yeah. So, but the idea is you have the same choice options. It's an unselected binder. So anything that is referenced and has this prominence, it can bind.
now you don't need to
You don't need to move